I thought Christmas dinner was about family, laughter, and a full table. I never imagined it would be the night I lost my sense of safety. The gravy was still warm when I heard my name whispered like a secret. One sentence changed how I saw my own home forever. And in that moment, I realized some smiles hide plans that can ruin your life. They say Christmas brings people closer. But that night, sitting at the head of my own table in suburban Australia, I felt further away from my family than ever before. The house around me, my $380,000 home, wasn't just bricks and walls. It was my late husband's laughter, my children's footsteps, and every sacrifice I ever made. I never thought I'd have to fight to keep it, especially from my own daughter-in-law. Christmas had always been my favorite time of the year. The lights outside my modest $380,000 suburban home glimmered like tiny stars against the cool December night. The smell of roasted lamb and fresh herbs filled the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of pavlova and Christmas pudding that had been baking for hours. I'd spent the entire day preparing the feast, carefully arranging the table with delicate porcelain plates, sparkling cutlery, and Christmas napkins folded neatly into triangles. Every detail mattered to me because, for once, I wanted everything to be perfect. The warmth, the laughter, the family together. My son Daniel, now 32, had arrived with his wife Melissa and their 2 children. The house was alive with the chatter of kids ripping open presents, the crinkle of wrapping paper under tiny hands, and the occasional shriek of delight when someone discovered a toy they'd been dreaming of all year. The atmosphere was festive, joyous, and it should have been the kind of evening that made me feel proud, loved, and content. But beneath the cheer, something had begun to gnaw the edges of my happiness, a subtle tension I hadn't noticed until that fateful moment in the hallway. After dinner, as the dishes were being cleared and the laughter began to settle into a comfortable hum, I excused myself to fetch extra plates from the kitchen. I was humming along to the carol playing softly in the background, unaware that what I was about to overhear would change everything. As I rounded the corner into the hallway, the voices came clearly to me, calm and deliberate, yet carrying a tone of secrecy that immediately set my nerves on edge. Melissa's voice floated through the lounge door, low and measured. "Once Mum's comfortable, we'll move my parents in. It's her house anyway. She won't say no." I froze mid-step. The plate in my hands felt impossibly heavy, as if it had absorbed all the weight of betrayal in that moment. I leaned slightly against the wall, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Surely I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. That's what I wanted to believe. But the sound of her mother laughing softly confirmed it wasn't. A big house like this? Perfect. And she's on her own now, her mother replied. The words dripped with expectation, entitlement, and a disregard for my feelings that made my stomach twist painfully. I backed away quietly, not wanting to make my presence known. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them, to demand an explanation, but I knew that revealing myself right then would only give them the upper hand. So I stayed hidden, listening as it continued, my heart hammering in my chest. They spoke about logistics, about timing, about how easy it would be to just move in when the time was right. I felt a cold shock spread through me. This wasn't just a passing thought or a hypothetical conversation. They had a plan, and I was the obstacle in it. Every word they uttered made my blood run colder, and yet I felt strangely powerless. How could I have missed this before? How could someone so close, someone I welcomed into my home, someone I trusted implicitly, plot to take it from me as if it were a mere possession? I remembered the years it had taken to build this life. Every weekend I worked extra shifts. Every sacrifice I made, every frugal decision, had been to create a home filled with love and security. And now, in one whispered conversation, they had disregarded all of that. The house wasn't just a building to me. It was a repository of memories. The laughter of my late husband echoing in the lounge, the first steps of my children taken in these very rooms, the countless nights I'd sat alone after losses or heartbreak, seeking comfort within these walls. And here they were, treating it like it was theirs to claim. As the night went on, I pretended to be part of the family's laughter and conversation, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying their voices, analyzing every syllable, every inflection, and every hidden meaning. The The jovial atmosphere around me felt hollow. The twinkling lights that had always warmed my heart now seemed to mock me, reminding me that appearances could be deceiving. I thought about confronting Daniel immediately, but a deeper fear held me back. I knew how protective he was of his wife, and I knew that confrontation could divide us further. So I stayed quiet, retreating inward, silently planning my next move. I reminded myself that knowledge is power. I now knew their intentions, and though fear curled around my chest like a heavy chain, I resolved to face them with clarity, calm, and strategy rather than panic. It was then that I realized the truth about family dynamics. Sometimes, the people closest to you could be the very ones who threaten what you hold most dear. And it was in that moment, standing in the hallway with a plate in my hands that suddenly felt like a shield, that I understood my life had shifted irreversibly. The Christmas I had imagined, filled with warmth, love, and uncomplicated joy, had been replaced by one of caution, vigilance, and heartbreak. Yet, amidst the shock and betrayal, a small flame of determination ignited within me. I wouldn't let my home, my sanctuary, be taken from me without a fight. I wouldn't let their calculated planning turn my life upside down. That night, the $380,000 house, a place built from love, sweat, and years of effort, became more than just a home. It became a battleground, a test of strength, and a crucible for resilience. As I finally returned to the dining room, pretending nothing had happened, I kept my thoughts hidden behind a calm smile. No one suspected what I had overheard. But deep inside, the gears were turning. Every word Melissa and her mother had spoken replayed in my mind, and with it, a plan began to form. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a battle I intended to win. And that Christmas, the twinkling lights and cheerful songs couldn't mask the resolve that had taken root in my heart. I would protect my home, my memories, and myself, no matter what it took. The night after I overheard Melissa's plan, I barely slept. The house that had always felt like a sanctuary suddenly seemed unfamiliar, almost hostile. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old wooden doors, sounded louder, sharper, as if the walls themselves were whispering warnings. I lay awake in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words I had heard over and over. Once Mom's comfortable, we'll move my parents in. It's a house anyway. She won't say no. I kept turning it over in my mind, searching for any possible misinterpretation, any reason to hope I had misunderstood. But there was no mistake. Their voices had been clear, deliberate, confident. They had a plan, and I was the obstacle. The realization cut deeper than any argument, any betrayal I had experienced before. This wasn't just about a house. It was about respect, trust, and the family I thought I knew. It was about the life my late husband and I had built, a life I had devoted myself to protecting, now being undermined by someone I had welcomed with open arms. I thought about my son, Daniel. He was a good man at heart, but he had always been enamored with Melissa's charm, blinded by her ability to weave her desires into his reality. He hadn't said a word during that conversation I had overheard. I could almost see the hesitation, the conflict in his eyes when he chose silence over defense. That silence, more than Melissa's words, cut me to the bone. My own son, the boy I raised to value honesty and integrity, was allowing this to happen under his roof. And yet, despite my hurt, I knew confronting him immediately would accomplish little. I had to be strategic, thoughtful. My anger had to be tempered with intelligence. I spent the rest of the night revisiting every detail of the house, the mortgage documents tucked away in the study, the title deeds locked in my safe, the accounts that held the balance of our life's work. Every small thing suddenly became a potential tool of protection, a barrier against intrusion. I realized how vulnerable I had been, how much I had taken for granted, and how easily someone could try to manipulate my generosity for their gain. In the quiet hours before dawn, I remember the laughter that used to fill the house when Daniel was little, the way his eyes would light up at Christmas, the warmth of family traditions that I had carefully nurtured. Those memories were mine to protect, mine to cherish. And yet, for the first time, I saw how easily those memories could be used against me. It wasn't just the house Melissa wanted. It was the life I had built, the authority I held within these walls, the sense of home I had fought to create. She wanted to erase me without raising a voice, and it terrified me. I felt a cocktail of emotions: betrayal, hurt, anger, and fear, each one sharp and raw, twisting inside me. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made: working extra shifts, skipping holidays, budgeting down to the last cent to ensure a comfortable home for my children and myself. I thought about my late husband and how he would have handled this: protective, decisive, unyielding. I wished for his presence more than ever, and I realized that now I had to be that person. I had to become the protector of the life and home we had built together. The next day, I moved through my routine with careful control, keeping my emotions in check. I greeted Daniel and Melissa with a warm, neutral smile, engaged with the children, and made small talk as if everything were normal. But beneath that calm exterior, my mind was racing. I started planning. I called my solicitor, booked a consultation, and asked for advice on property protection and legal rights. Every step was deliberate. I would not let impulsive anger dictate my actions. This was about strategy, about securing my future and asserting my boundaries. Over the following days, I observed Melissa closely, studying her behavior, noting her interactions, and assessing her intentions. Every comment she made about the house, every suggestion that seemed casual or innocent, I now saw through the lens of that conversation I had overheard. It was unnerving to realize how close I had come to being blindsided, how cleverly she had disguised her ambitions under the guise of family warmth. I also confronted my own feelings: the guilt, the fear, and the doubt that threatened to consume me. Was I overreacting? Was I misinterpreting her words? No. Deep down, I knew the truth. The plan had been real, and my intuition was right. That certainty gave me a strange mix of dread and resolve. I knew the path forward would not be easy. There would be tension, awkward confrontations, and perhaps even family rifts. But it was necessary. Protecting my home meant protecting my dignity, my independence, and the integrity of my life. In the evenings, when the house finally grew quiet, I would sit in the lounge and reflect on what had happened. I pictured scenarios: confrontations with Melissa, discussions with Daniel, negotiations with my solicitor. Each image steeled me, strengthened me. The fear that had initially paralyzed me slowly transformed into a determined vigilance. I began to understand something crucial. Betrayal is painful, but it can also awaken a strength you never knew you had. And so, while the house itself remained physically unchanged, the atmosphere had shifted. My sanctuary had become a place of quiet preparation. I learned to navigate conversations carefully, to assert my presence without confrontation, and to maintain control over my emotions. The betrayal had created a chasm between me and the people I once considered family, but it also gave me clarity. I could no longer assume that love or familial ties would automatically safeguard my well-being. I had to be proactive. Through this experience, I discovered a side of myself I hadn't fully acknowledged, a side that was strategic, assertive, and unyielding. I realized that the house, while important, was also symbolic. It represented my life, my choices, and my strength. Melissa's plan, while audacious, inadvertently forced me to confront fears I had long ignored and to embrace a newfound power and resilience. The tension lingered like a shadow over the house, subtle but ever-present. I had to remain cautious, but the fear was tempered by the knowledge that I was no longer a passive participant in my own story. I was awake. I was aware. And most importantly, I was ready to protect my home, my memories, and my future, no matter the cost. By the end of that week, I had begun implementing protective measures, securing documents, updating legal protections, and setting boundaries with both Daniel and Melissa. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but the spark that Melissa had unwittingly ignited within me was unstoppable. Betrayal had come into my life disguised as a holiday evening, but it would not break me. Instead, it would forge me into someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid to fight for what was rightfully mine. The morning after another restless night, I felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. Every familiar corner, The lounge where my children had played, the kitchen where I had cooked countless meals, the hallway where I had stood frozen listening to Melissa's plan, now seemed charged with tension. I had spent days replaying the conversation in my mind, thinking through every possible approach, every strategy. I knew one thing for certain. I could no longer remain silent. The house wasn't just property. It was my sanctuary, my memories, my life. And I was determined to protect it. I made my way to the kitchen, forcing myself to act normal, as Daniel poured coffee for himself and Melissa. The smell of freshly brewed coffee should have been comforting, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I could see the faint traces of guilt on Daniel's face, though he tried hard to mask it. And Melissa, she was radiant, her smile casual, effortless, hiding the cunning I had uncovered just days before. I took a deep breath and decided that today I would confront the situation head-on, with calmness and control rather than panic or anger. "Melissa," I began, keeping my tone neutral but firm, "can we talk for a moment?" There was a long, heavy silence. I could feel the shift in the room. The dynamic that Melissa had assumed she could control, the subtle manipulation, the expectation that I would quietly comply, had been broken. I had found my voice, and with it, the authority that came from knowledge, preparation, and moral clarity. Daniel shifted in his seat again, finally meeting my eyes. I understand, Mum," he said quietly, and for the first time, I sensed a glimmer of support. He wasn't fully with me yet, but the seed of understanding had been planted. Melissa's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. I could see the calculation in her gaze, the immediate recognition that I would not be moved. She had underestimated me, assuming that my kindness would be my weakness. She was wrong. Over the following hours, the tension didn't fully dissipate, but something crucial had shifted. The confrontation had established boundaries. The message had been sent. This house, these walls, this life were mine to protect. I had faced fear with calm, anger with strategy, and betrayal with strength. The air was still charged, but now it carried a different energy, one of quiet authority, of someone unwilling to be manipulated. That day, I realized that confrontation was not about raising your voice or demanding victory. It was about clarity, consistency, and presence. It was about showing up fully, standing firm, and refusing to allow someone else's ambitions to override your life. Melissa might try again, and Daniel might falter, but I had proven to myself and them that I would no longer be passive. By evening, the house was quiet once more. I sat in the lounge, reflecting on the morning's events, the emotion still simmering beneath the surface. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and empowerment. I had faced the immediate threat, but I knew the journey was far from over. Melissa would test boundaries, Daniel might hesitate, and the tension would continue. But I had learned a critical truth. Strength does not come from ignoring betrayal. It comes from confronting it with patience, strategy, and unwavering conviction. That confrontation, though uncomfortable and charged with emotion, had changed the entire dynamic of my home. I was no longer a silent observer of my life being undermined. I had reclaimed control, asserted my rights, and set the foundation for the next steps: legal protection, reinforced boundaries, and a clearer understanding of the dynamics at play. For the first time since that fateful Christmas dinner, I felt a sense of clarity. I knew the battle ahead would not be easy, but I was ready. I was no longer the passive mother who hoped her kindness would shield her from harm. I was awake, alert, and prepared. And that morning, in the kitchen with Melissa and Daniel, I had proven to myself and them that I would fight for my home, my life, and my peace, no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed the confrontation, a remarkable shift occurred within me. What had begun as a tense awareness of betrayal gradually transformed into a quiet, resolute empowerment. Each day, I reminded myself that my home, my memories, and my dignity were mine to protect, and that I had the right to assert that protection. The fear that had once curled tightly around my chest began to loosen, replaced by a calm but firm sense of determination. I realized that the first step to reclaiming control was understanding my own power and taking deliberate action. I started small. I reviewed all the legal documents I had stored away, the title deeds, the mortgage papers, and records of ownership. I contacted a solicitor specializing in property rights, explaining the situation with full transparency, and sought guidance on ensuring my home could not be claimed or invaded without my consent. The advice I received was practical and precise. Update the will, clarify property rights, and ensure all legal protections were current. Each step I took strengthened not only the security of my home, but also my own confidence. I felt a sense of relief, knowing I had the law firmly on my side. But legal protection alone was not enough. I needed to reclaim the emotional and psychological space in my home. I began establishing boundaries with both Melissa and Daniel. Simple measures at first, politely limiting unannounced visits, ensuring that conversations about future plans for the house always included my presence, and clearly communicating that any decisions involving the property required my explicit consent. These actions, though small, sent a clear message. I was no longer passive. I was aware, engaged, and in control. During family interactions, I became mindful of my tone, my body language, and my presence. I maintained warmth and civility when appropriate, but I never allowed my guard to drop. I spoke with intention, listened carefully, and refrained from being drawn into manipulative arguments. The subtle shift in my posture and voice signaled that I was no longer someone who could be easily pressured or persuaded. Even Daniel noticed the change. The boy I had raised, who had once hesitated to confront his wife, began to show a quiet respect for the clarity and authority I now embodied. Emotionally, the transformation was just as significant. I allowed myself to acknowledge the anger, hurt, and betrayal I had felt, without letting them consume me. Writing in my journal became a nightly ritual, a space to reflect on feelings, document conversations, and plan next steps. I realized that naming my emotions and examining them objectively gave me power. It was a reminder that strength does not mean suppressing feelings. It means acknowledging them and using that awareness to act wisely. I also sought support from friends who understood my values and history. Their encouragement reinforced the truth I had come to embrace. Being kind does not equate to being weak. I could maintain compassion without compromising my safety or allowing others to take advantage. The house, my sanctuary, became a symbol not of fear but of resilience. Each step I took, legal, emotional, and relational, was a brick in a foundation of strength that could not be shaken by manipulation or entitlement. There were moments of doubt, naturally. Melissa continued to test boundaries subtly, dropping comments about family visits or temporary stays. But each time, I responded with calm, measured reminders of my rules and expectations. I refused to let guilt or obligation override my principles. I had learned that empowerment is not a one-time act. It is a sustained practice of vigilance, courage, and self-respect. By the end of the month, a noticeable shift had occurred in the household dynamic. Melissa's attempts to assert control were met with polite but unwavering resistance. Daniel, slowly but surely, began to stand with me in principle, even if awkwardly at first. And I, for the first time in years, felt a deep sense of security and inner peace within my own walls. The house that had once felt vulnerable and threatened was now a space where my authority, choices, and memories were respected. In that process, I learned an invaluable lesson. Strength comes from asserting boundaries, seeking clarity, and taking deliberate action. Kindness is not weakness, and family is not permission to disregard respect. I realize that empowerment is about preparation, intention, and the courage to act decisively when necessary. Each legal safeguard I implemented, each boundary I reinforced, and each moment I spoke with conviction reaffirmed my right to protect my life and home. And so, even as the festive lights faded and the remnants of Christmas were cleared away, I carried a renewed sense of confidence into the new year. The experience had transformed me. I was no longer the passive observer of my own life. I was a proactive guardian of my home, my family, and my dignity. I had found my voice, clear, firm, and unyielding, and nothing, not even manipulation cloaked in familial warmth, could take it from me months past, and the tension that had once filled the house began to ease. Melissa's parents never moved in, and their visits, once frequent and demanding, gradually became rare and formal. The energy of entitlement that had threatened to destabilize my life dissipated, replaced by a cautious respect. The shift wasn't immediate or loud. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to an outsider. But for me, it was profound. My home, the $380,000 sanctuary I had poured my heart, money, and years into, was once again mine in both spirit and reality. Daniel's behavior also changed. Slowly, carefully, he began to show signs of genuine remorse and understanding. One evening, while we were clearing the dishes after dinner, he paused and looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mix of guilt and vulnerability. "Mom," he said softly, "I didn't know how to handle it before, but I see now. I should have supported you sooner." I nodded, keeping my emotions in check. Forgiveness wasn't automatic. It wasn't a free pass to forget the past. But I recognized that Daniel's hesitation had stemmed from love and loyalty to his wife, not malice. "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "What matters now is that we move forward with honesty, respect, and clear boundaries. That's what keeps a family strong." Melissa, on the other hand, approached the situation differently. At first, there was resistance, subtle attempts to test limits, comments about family needs, and casual suggestions that I should be more flexible. Each time, I responded calmly, firmly, and without anger. I didn't argue or raise my voice. I simply repeated the boundaries I had set and stood my ground. Over time, her confidence in manipulating me eroded. She learned that my kindness did not mean compliance, and that my authority in my own home was absolute. Through this process, I discovered a profound truth. Power and security do not come from fear or aggression. They come from clarity, consistency, and self-respect. Every step I took, updating my will, consulting legal advisors, asserting boundaries, and maintaining calm authority, reinforced a message that I would not be undermined. My home became a space of safety and stability, not tension or manipulation. Emotionally, I felt lighter. The anxiety that had plagued me for months gradually lifted. I allowed myself to enjoy my home again. The smells of cooking, the laughter of my children and grandchildren, and the warmth of familiar spaces. I realized that the true value of a home is not its market price or square footage, but the sense of peace, security, and belonging it provides. I had reclaimed that fully, and it was worth more than any money or property could ever represent. One quiet evening, I sat on the lounge, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the Christmas dinner that had sparked this ordeal, the whispered plan I had overheard, and the months of vigilance, confrontation, and assertion that followed. I felt a sense of pride and relief. I had faced fear, betrayal, and potential loss with strength, wisdom, and grace. I had not only protected my home, but also my dignity and independence. I also realized the deeper lessons. Kindness does not equal weakness. Love does not mean blind trust, and family loyalty should never come at the cost of one's own well-being. I had learned to listen to my instincts, to act decisively when necessary, and to set boundaries that safeguard both my property and my peace of mind. These lessons were hard-earned, but they had transformed me into a stronger, wiser, and more resilient person. By the time the year turned, the atmosphere in the house had shifted completely. The subtle tension that had once threatened to unravel my life was gone. Daniel had become more attentive to the realities of family dynamics, and Melissa, while still present, no longer assumed control. I had regained not only my home, but also my sense of authority and self-assurance. That Christmas, nearly a year after the dinner that had shaken me, I sat surrounded by my children and grandchildren, the house filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet joy of togetherness. I allowed myself to smile freely, knowing that I had protected everything that mattered to me, not through confrontation alone, but through courage, planning, and steadfast belief in my own worth. And in that moment, I understood the most important truth of all. Home is more than a physical space. It is a sanctuary of safety, love, and respect. And no one, not even those we call family, can take that away unless we allow it. I had chosen to protect it, and in doing so, I had chosen myself. That Christmas taught me something no gift ever could. that home is more than walls and furniture. It's a sanctuary of respect, love, and memories. I protected mine, not with anger, but with courage, clarity, and unwavering boundaries. And in choosing myself, I found a peace no one could ever take away.